18, it was 4,096 we budgeted. This year we have to budget 7746, a $3,600 increase. And that's for every staff member that we have for the city. And that's a formula. The percentage was 3.1 last year. It's 5.9 this year. And that's a number that they give us annually that we have to put in for the PERS relief. So you'll see that as a recurring theme. What we try to do in all of these budgets, at least at this juncture, is to restore some of the monies that we knew the line, or we know the line items are going to be short and overspent. So you'll see that. Again, I'll say, don't be too concerned at this point when you see the bottom line, because this is our first go at it. You can see the mayor, little bit of increases in there. City managers increases, primarily to FICA, PERS, and as you can see, PERS relief. There's no other increases in that line item. Finance, fairly the same. Now, I will say that in the area of personnel, we've built a 2% increase across the board into this budget. And that's why you'll see an increase in salaries. The last year we negotiated the collective bargaining agreement in May. We negotiated a 1-year agreement at 2%, and that covers May to May. So if there's a 2% increase in this budget, it will begin in May and cover till next May, because the contract is off sequence. One of the things that we're trying to do in the collective bargaining agreement is get it on track with the budgeting year so that it makes more sense. And then the exempt personnel have 2% built into their salaries. I think this will be the third year they haven't really had any, except for some I guess you'd call them bonuses we gave them last year. You gave them last year that were relatively small, so these will come in here. Planning department goes up a little bit. Now, steps, when somebody's due a step, that happens automatically. We have to budget for those regardless in the collective bargaining unit, because that's part of the agreement. So if you're due a step, you get the step, and those have to be programmed in, which automatically every year are going to raise some of the costs. About half our staff is the collective bargaining is due to do a step, because you get a step every other year. That's the way it's written in the agreement. When I arrived, some of those steps were being doubled up. We now only give steps when they're due in that particular year. There's no in-betweeners. So, and that's, certainly not based upon how hard people work, but just the necessity of money. Planning Commission, put a little bit of more money in there. You can see that in any of these areas that the increase isn't extraordinarily big, but it all adds up at the end of the day. Department of Motor Vehicles. Now, the whole law enforcement staff are split between law enforcement, communications, DMV. There's a lot of this intertwined, so you can see that there's an increase there. That's really for one DMV person and some part-time, so there's about 14,000 extra. You see law enforcement goes up by 57,000 because of another full-time officer. We still have all 6 officers budgeted in this budget. So if we're gonna cut back on that, then we'll have to do it. Overtime is a biggie. The PERS, again, you can see with lots of staff, the PERS number goes way up. The health insurance number went up, and that's not because of the cost of health insurance, it's because of the number of people taking health insurance. And you know, the law enforcement really did a good job of putting in the stuff that they wanted. So you can see that their budget's up if you scroll down to the bottom of their budget a little bit. You can see that their budget's about 172 grand in asks, a little bit higher, and we'll get into some more of that. Jail operations are up. Another dispatcher on people who reduce steps and increase costs comes out to 37,000. I think you can see the law enforcement takes a good chunk of our budget. One of the things we talked about during the strategic planning was, at least the time that I understanding, was support for emergency and law enforcement services in the community, doing our best to provide those in total, in full. So that's what this first budget reflects. Fire and EMS goes up a little bit, increase in personnel costs. Really has been some holding off of repairs and buying things that they need on equipment and so forth, so you can see that those requests are in this budget. Some items have come down, but some have gone up. 53,000 increase. Disaster management, we have 2 part-time people now doing the work of Joni. Still learning on the job a little bit, so we thought it prudent to put a little bit of money extra into those line items to help with that transition. Information services. This budget is based upon, just pretty much the same as last year, except for staff increases. There's some people who have steps, and this budget at the end of the year will look dramatically different than this. Kathy submitted a resignation. She'll retire sometime in I think May. So while this is budgeted, I think this number will be significantly lower than that. Replacement of books and periodicals, again, PERS relief, some of those things. So you're getting the theme that there's increases in every area as we go through this budget. So utilities, again, increases. Most of the increases here, there's no staff here, just based upon our costs of providing those services and so forth. And our heating oil, we really cut that to the bone last year. Some of those things, so restoring some of those line items to a better level so that we don't have to rob from other accounts to keep it solvent. You can see Public Works Administration. This is Rich's position. As you can see, I have eliminated all of the costs for that position for next year, indicating that it is my plan not to fill that position. We will make some internal adjustments to that position and use funds for contracting the appropriate engineering services when we need them for different things. And while that's not necessarily reflected in this budget very well, this first cut of it, that would be my suggestion. Although we do have an ad out. We're advertising for a public works director. What we've taken out of that ad is the necessity of a professional engineering certificate. So we're trying to cover a number of bases.
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
Okay, so when we created this position and then added in the engineer portion of it, it was because of some of the things we had going on that we were outsourcing engineers for, or hiring engineers to review P&D and things like that, and we were spending a lot of money on it. So that was part of the theory in getting somebody who could fill both of those roles, public works director and also a staff engineer. I don't know what the future looks like project-wise for that use, but that was the background from the reason we did it.
Yeah. I think in the coming year with what we know, I'm reasonably comfortable doing that at this point. Obviously, if you feel that's necessary as a council for that particular position, we'll go that direction and add those costs back in. But we're going to be covered till the end of the year. I believe we're going to make plans that are consistent with the rest of the year for the following year. Going to move some folks around, do a couple things, and see where we end up. I mean, if you get to the point where you realize that you can't provide the service, then you can always go out and do something different.
Yeah.
So is our intent? So have you already made up your mind not to hire that position, but we're advertising for fun, or you're not decided yet?
I've reasonably made up my mind that I would recommend that we not hire that position, but I'd like to see what's on the market. I'd like to see what kind of response we get. It may be possible that we can get a very good public works director that may not have a PE, but still may be able to provide us all of the necessary services that we require. A public works director. So, I want to see what's out there, and if we don't, we'll just kind of mosey along with it. And if we got somebody that we were really high on in terms of that position, we can always reappropriate and hire. But right now, I think what we're going to do is, I've had a conversation with Sam, and she's going to fill in. She's the deputy director, so she's going to fill in till the end of the year, make plans for 19 with her, and see where we end up, see where we go. Maybe we'll get projects and we realize that we've got to have an engineering person again, but, again, we can't be afraid to make adjustments to what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I'm not so sure we saved any engineering money over the past couple of years, anyway, so.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Facility maintenance, pretty consistent. Few downturns there, but everything's pretty consistent in facility maintenance. Street maintenance, a little bit in overtime. We really cut the temporary employees. We really cut them, but we substituted more overtime for more temporary employees, which helps us in terms of the dollar value Added some money for the health insurance costs went up. The operating supplies, they asked for a pretty significant increase there. Leases and rentals of equipment to do some in-house work. Professional services is way up. And you could just read it, for example, 100,000 on vehicles and parts. Excuse me, thinking that we have a number of vehicles that have to be replaced. Also chip sealing maintenance, which we, went at 55 last year, going up to 85 gives us 2 or 3 chip seal opportunities. So that's a significant budgeting increase there. Snow removal. Not much change in snow removal. Actually, a little bit. Not much there. Equipment maintenance, not a whole lot of change there. Actually spending less. Parks maintenance, you'll see that if you add up park maintenance, Bedarkie, and the pool, you will see that entire area has an increase of about $6,000 to the bottom line. But what Susie has done is she's completely restructured the whole thing so that we have better operational coverage, better maintenance coverage, and better facility coverage. And so these numbers reflect a number of those changes. And so for the $6,000, I think it's going to be well worth the complete restructuring of those departments. So you can keep going. A little bit up on cemetery maintenance. We didn't do much last year with equipment improvements. Bedarkie, keep going. Keep going. You can see that she decreased her cost in Bedarkie by $339. Not a lot, but, and you can see in terms of the pool, I think their costs are down overall at the pool. And keep going. So they're down about 18.5. So you're up 14, 18.5. So, for fairly reasonable amount of money, they have completely revamped all of these divisions and given more full-time people. Ski Hill's going to be the same as last year. Still putting $15,000 in them for repair and maintenance. They built that little cabin shed up there last year with that $15,000, or did they do a roof? One of the two did a roof. Non-departmental, you can see what those things are. Some of those are grants that we get reimbursements for, John Bitney's fees, attorney fees, audit fees, those kinds of things. And but it's consistent with last year. Long-term debt service goes down about $10,000 a year, $3,000 a year. A lot of payments on the front end on those. So that's about the same. Transfers out, the $80,000 is intended to go to the capital projects fund, so that if we run into asphalt opportunities or we run into some of those unexpected opportunities, we have money budgeted for them that we don't have to worry about, because a lot of this goes to the capital projects fund. And you can see last year, remember when we were talking about we had a little bit of surplus, and rather than worry about where that was placed in $5,000 at a time, we put it in this fund, and that helped us pay for the asphalt and the things that went forward. The school district, the hospital is down $25,000. We're anticipating that the CCMC is not going to request any additional money this year. Of course, you don't know that until you get to the end, but pretty good shape on that one. I sent you an email on explaining the $800,000 loss that was related to us. So I hope that was helpful. And then here's our bottom line. If you look at the right-hand column, our general fund revenue is projected as 10.745, and our expenditures are 11,041 for a $296,000 difference shortage. I think that's a pretty reasonable place to start without really taking a really hard look at the budget. And so, and that budget is only, it's less than 400,000 more than last year in terms of revenue. So, and that comes from adding 6 and cutting 2, really.
Yeah, but it's 700,000 more expenditures.
Correct.
Was it only 296 million? All those increases.
Because he increased revenue by 400,000.
More.
Yeah, but it should be
That's-
704,000. Different than that.
Don't look at the middle column, this yellow, just look at the right-hand column.
Yeah, but the net here should be the difference in these two.
Yeah.
It's not.
No?
It is. Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's 296.
296 more, yeah.
So that's the first cut of the general fund. And then if we'll proceed, does anybody have any questions they'd like to?
Comment.
Sure.
I'd like a narrative on anything that's, anytime those yellows or blues are
Okay.
25% difference. I didn't want, if they're $100 difference, I
Yeah.
don't care, but if it was $1,000 in 17 and it's 2,000 now, I'd like to have some kind of a narrative that says why. Just a brief.
They do provide me with those, but I don't have them on here. Okay, yes, sir.
I had a question on the law enforcement portion.
Yes.
You mentioned that they, I think it was like 56,000 more in salary was for another position. So I thought we were already fully staffed in the previous 2 years.
We have, let me look at the number here. I think these numbers reflect pay scales and full-time officers. So 460 was basically the bottom of the scale. And this is where officers were hired for their compensation, so it increases the cost.
And are we fully staffed now with all 6 officer positions filled?
No,
We're still struggling to fill those.
we just have one
One left.
We're, now, depending on, what full staffing is, that's another conversation. 6 officers and a chief, 6 dispatchers, versus 5 and a chief, those kinds of things. And Mike has been outstanding about covering shifts. And, did an exercise once where you take a position like an officer, and by the time you do training, sick leave, vacation, all of those things, getting hurt, being out of commission, as officers quite often do, they're only available for about $1,600 a year. So if you take 24 times 365, it takes at least 5 full-time officers to cover 24/7 if you don't have any glitches. So that's kind of where we are. So we can't have glitches.
But the budget includes full staffing.
I think it includes everything that we need this year.
I was just curious because I thought we already had 6 budget positions, but
makes sense that if we hired officers that are further up the pay scale than maybe what we had before, that it would have to raise.
Yeah, I don't have my detail sheet with me, but
And those next two lines should be blue too, huh?
Yeah.
yeah, they should be blue too. Sorry. I missed some of them.
It's all right, we'll let it slide this time.
If you go down, let's go to the enterprise funds. And I'll just give you the premise of what we've done here. These are a little more, these require a little more input from John. But here's what we've done. We did a 10% increase last year at the harbor. This year we did a 5% increase, basically across the board. You can see on the right-hand side. And so the revenue comes out at 1.471693. What we had, I think the direction we're gonna need from you is if we're gonna pursue the 5 million and match it with 5 million. You know, there are gonna have to be some fees involved to cover the payment on that, and that payment's gonna be about 400 grand. So if you're looking at this in terms of that grant and that work at the harbor, we're gonna have to add about 400,000 to the revenue for this. Now I think there's a number of ways you can do that. People can argue that it's, you know, it's not appropriate, good is appropriate, however, but I'll kind of give you a flavor of options that you might have. So if you go down the interfund transfers in, the pension state relief number is bigger. Salaries and wages have gone up, and that's again because full-time people with higher salaries working. We have some, you know, the temps and stuff. This budget's pretty static except for the administrative costs are down by 11%, down to 161. The rest of it is pretty much the same in terms of expenditures.
Need to recolor code that.
Yeah, there's some colors, that's right.
And then the transfer to the reserve, I gave you a printout on the reserves. Depreciation, we haven't put that in there yet. Depreciation just makes it look like an operating loss. It's really not a cash loss. The other things are pretty consistent. So you can see that based upon a 5% increase, there's about 23,000 remaining that could be appropriated. If you were going to increase this fund by 400,000, where are you going to get that money? First of all, you could take the 150 from the depreciation reserve. And instead of appropriating that to the depreciation reserve, you could use it for the payment. Your depreciation reserve then, it could be argued, I think, is less necessary because you're making $10 million worth of improvements and you have a little bit more time to make those adjustments. The other thing that you could eliminate is the administrative fee. Although we would continue to do the work, you could eliminate the administrative fee. For this particular enterprise fund, that would come up with $310,000 and for your $400,000 payment. And so you really wouldn't have to make that big of an adjustment in the revenue to cover the rest of it. That's one way to do it. The other way is just increase the fees. James, did you have a?
I did, yeah. Well, first question was about the reduction on the travel lift forecasted use. Is there a reason that it went down? It doesn't, I mean, every year that I've been here, that thing's been busy.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that right offhand.
It was a bad season.
It's still early in the, I mean, that's probably what the numbers are right now. We're pretty close to that, so. We still have some outstanding bills.
So one of the things you'll have to decide in this upcoming budget is how you want to approach this. You know, I've stated that I think we should go for that grant, get headed down the road on this, and get it started. So, but that's one way you could do it. Now, what does that do? That knocks $160,000 off the general fund budget, which then takes us to 430 deficit. But you know, we can try to figure our way through that. So that's one possibility for you. If you go down a bit, I'm sorry, go to the next. Again, under sewer, wastewater, we programmed in a 5% increase, 37,331 in additional revenues. The costs go up a little bit here on certain items. You know, some of the PERS costs and those things are getting out of whack, meaning they're going up. Operating supplies a little bit. And one of the things that everybody's trying to do is gain a little bit of ground that they lost, you know, in the budget for 2017, which was a tough budget. So if you go down to the bottom of this one, two changes are the equipment furnishings and other improvements that they need to make out at the sewer. So your total is, what's my total set? No, keep going, yeah. About 23,950 short. So, that's not too bad. Our in-kind services transfers out. So that one's pretty close. We could make some adjustments really easy there to make it balance. But again, the theme is 5% increase. And as you remember what I said, I'm advocating a 5% increase in the enterprise funds over 5 years, to get to the point where you can purchase equipment and make some necessary repairs on a $40 trash bill, $10 over the course of that time. So I realize it's $10, but it's an increase. Water operations, 5%, sort of the same theme going down. Some of my losses should be yellows. Some of my, so I get my numbers or my colors mixed up. And if you look at the bottom line on these, again, there's $7,000 short, which we can easily translate into a balanced budget. Refuse is a little bit bigger. It's a $1 million fund, 5% increase again. Of course, the refuse issue here is how do you buy a $269,000 truck? You know, without saving enough money to do that on a regular basis. And the only way to do that is you're going to have more money that goes into reserves. As you can see from your sheet, they have about 100,000 right now. Professional services are up a little bit on the landfill because I think we're going to be getting to closure time here. And if you go down to the bottom, 75,000 in additional revenue unaccounted for. So we're in the blue on that one. Then the last one is Odiac. Odiac's the star of the show all the time. Odiac turns a profit every year. Not much change there. Moose and, share some salaries and wages and so forth. And they're in the good again, $376 to the good. So those are kind of in a nutshell what we've done so far. I will email you a copy of this budget tomorrow, and I will entertain any questions you have. Trying to remember that this is, there's this, in addition to the hard numbers here, you know, the philosophical approach to this, of how we're gonna deal with some of these items. And those really are the purchase of equipment and the funds to be able to do that.
Questions? Go ahead. Go ahead, Jim.
I'm still trying to fix my chair.
Oh, anybody?
I guess I've got a couple questions. Before I go back to the harbor stuff, which I'm so passionate about, I was wondering if, you know, you talked a lot about last year about like an events coordinator, trying to partner more, get more activities going that would bring in a diversified economy of scale, perhaps. And I was wondering if that's in this budget, or if you've gone away from that thinking, or.
Well, that's certainly not in this budget. With the loss of 300,000 in revenue and the need to make that up, it just, you know, seems like taxes are out of the realm. We were gonna have to raise more money to fill a position like that. You're, you know, probably the cost of that position to get somebody first rate and all the benefits required, you know, 125, maybe 150. And I don't see that happening in the current environment unless you think so. You know, we've tried to do that in other ways. We've made our own contacts with cruise ships. We've tried to do some of those things, but, you know, certainly falls short. And we haven't had a year to concentrate on that yet, so, you know, in the coming year, who knows what we can do internally.
Okay, and then back to the harbor stuff. I don't know if Leif could scroll the. So we need to come up with, if we want to pursue a 5 million bond or just 5 million city contribution. I'm not sure what how you came up with that 400.
Well, I think what we're trying to pursue is, we're gonna bond 5 million and then seek the 5 million from the state in the grant that they have available for us for a $10 million project. And 5 million would have, in my mind, we'd bond the 5 million.
And then the other million that we have in the reserve, we wouldn't use that, or,
I don't think so.
We have to pay for engineering.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not covered in the grant, design and engineering.
Well, I liked your plan of, you know, trying to split it up between the 3 different revenue streams. A small increase, of course, we're gonna have to have an increase in fees to pay for any sort of huge project. But then also, you know, rededicating the in-kind service, whatever it's called. Administrative allocation cost. And then the, you know, the 150,000.
Appreciation, you have
How long?
310 of your 4 covered,
So how long would that payment take then?
20 years.
20 years. So then we wouldn't be saving anything for 20 years, which by the time that's over, we're gonna have to replace the harbor again.
Well,
Or we're gonna have to replace a loading dock, or we're gonna have, you know, that's.
yeah, I think what you're looking at though is, if you stay on a plan, what you're looking at is you're looking at the immediate replacement and improvement right now. But then you just can't sit on it for 20 years. There's gonna have to be some movement on the fees and so forth over that 20-year period to be able to make those improvements. And to do that all in 1 year would be difficult, of course. So that's the way I envision it. And then the possibility of what the $10 million does for us on the open market of grants and federal funding that may assist us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really a sort of a bigger picture thing, and if you're gonna get this, you just, how you're gonna bite the bullet is up to you guys.
Was the Tiger Grant or whatever that's called now, is that what it's called now? Was that part of the 10 million, or was that in addition to?
I see it as part of harbor improvements. I don't necessarily correlate it with the 10 million. Sam and I differ on this, but what I see us doing as we move along here, with the certainty that we're gonna apply for the 5 and match it with 5, we have 10, we're gonna adjust the build grant to make any other improvements we want to completely redo the harbor.
So it would be in addition to the,
It would be an addition to in my mind.
at one point in time, we were talking that perhaps that could cover our half of the, our 5 million match to the 5 million up.
You know, it may, but
That was mentioned at one time, I don't know.
I may, but I wouldn't count on that. I think we're gonna have to make some contribution here.
I definitely agree with the thinking that the repayment needs to come from the harbor itself. You know, if we're gonna spend, bond out 5 million, the harbor's gotta repay that 5 million. It can't be on the property taxes or anything like that, so. Yeah, 10 million's not enough. I think we all know that, but it's a good start. And I think that is the direction the city needs to be taking right now, because it's getting bad down there. One thing I am concerned about is if we redo the floating stock, losing stalls could affect that revenue number, because we're at 110% capacity as is. So if we lose any more than we currently have, that could affect our calculation on any sort of an increase being more than we're at now. So it's just a consideration to take into account.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I apologize for coming in late. So we're talking about bonding $5 million and paying that $5 million with the administrative fee that the harbor is paying.
And the depreciation fee.
And an increase in harbor fees.
And another increase, a little bit of increase in harbor
Okay,
fees.
so
Be like 15%.
we're working on a budget that doesn't get us to where we want to be just for general operations with the harbor aside. So talking about taking this money from here and this money from here and using it to miraculously pay for it, we're gonna have to replace that money with something else.
Roger.
The administrative fee, it's not free money.
Yeah, and I agree, but what I think, you know, because the two taxes were rescinded, and we need to have another full tax discussion, excise taxes and so forth. Instead, this year, I'm recommending that we commit to the 5% increases in the enterprise funds, and then retool the way we approach the taxes in the general fund. If we use the SRS funds as a funding mechanism, and, you know, our belief is that's gonna be reappropriated for the next 2 or 3 years, it gives us more time to be able to make the adjustments in the general fund. I'm gonna say right now that this, I think I could balance this general fund pretty quick, like in about 5 minutes tomorrow, because we're close enough right now at 296,000, saying that we're gonna add 161 to that, we go to 457. That's still gonna be a pretty reasonable number for us to approach right now to get the budget balance. Granted, we haven't done the full review on it with John and so forth, but this is much better than where we were even last year in terms of being close to having a balanced budget. So I'm not really afraid of the administrative fee. The depreciation fee was going into, savings anyway. Into that. And so I guess, again, the philosophical approach is, do you want to attack that 5 million? Because if we're going to do that, we have to get going. We have to make it known. We have to line up our finances for that. We have to do a whole bunch of things. And the sooner we know that, the better. And then the 5% in all the enterprise funds, And I think on a second cut in the general fund, after we've had some conversations, I think we'll be pleasantly surprised where we're at. Again, the real wild card here is not even the SRS funding, it's that state reimbursement money. That's the real wild card here.
What's SRS funding?
School resource,
Secure rural schools.
secure rural schools. So just quickly, if you go back to the budget and you take this formula and you take out the secure rural schools at 580 and you take out the debt relief and you add it to the current bottom line, we're 1.296 million short in this budget. So, what's the worst thing that could happen? The worst thing that could happen right now in this particular budget is you didn't get the 580 and you didn't get the 916. You got some number south of that. Let's say you got the 716. So you're 796,000 short.
Plus the 260 something.
Right.
I think that was adding back in the 296.
Wow.
You have the ability, and I know you don't want to do this, but you're not destitute in the UBS funds, the $1 million, the central treasury, for 1 year, you could backfill it. But if you have a plan going forward, all of these situations are temporary, you hope.
Well, we also have 700,000 in budget increases, line item increases from the current year.
Two sides to every balance sheet.
So what I'll do is I'll do a little work on this. James, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. So this allocation, this $160,000 from the harbor, that is just considered an in-kind service after this, or does the harbor take up that work and do it themselves?
Well, some of what we do, they do some and we do some. But we charge all departments for the allocated resources of accounting, finance, payroll, all of the things that we provide for all staff in this city, and we charge everybody a standard percentage for that. But, if we're going to eliminate the 161, we'll put as much of that onus on the harbor as we can, and still, we'll continue to provide the service internally. Much as we
How
can.
much for the service?
Health insurance costs, they still seem like they're big. What's happening with our self-insurance?
Our self-insurance, we don't have the number this year. We haven't had an increase in 4 years. This is going on 5 if we don't get this one. We just don't have the number in right now to see if there's going to be any increase. We have both a self-insurance quote, and we're going to have a provider quote from Primera, which we get every year. We're pretty hopeful that we will remain stagnant again, or constant again. The big increases this year were in PERS relief. A lot of the big ones, the formula went from 3.1 to 5.9. We get a new formula calculation every year, and then based upon that, we have to do PERS relief, and it basically doubled the cost for PERS relief across the organization. I also, I think before you arrived, in this budget is built in a 2% salary increase across the board. It'd be 2% for exempt staff, and then the 2% for, which we haven't negotiated, we just did a 1-year deal at 2% that runs out in May of this year. So 2% is for half of the year for bargaining unit and staff, and then we'd have another budget coming. Although we're trying to get their agreement to coincide with a fiscal year, January to to December. But just so you know, that's all built into this too. Yes, sir.
So I know in our strategic planning sessions that we did and in the budget workshops we had last year, you talked about reducing the total number of staff throughout the enterprise. I was wondering, through attrition, I was wondering how's the progress coming on that?
Well, last year we had 58.8. No, we added a police officer and a dispatcher, which we're budgeted for, so that takes us to, we're at about 60 across the organization.
If we lose Rich, like you were discussing.
Yeah, we'll be at about 60.
Okay.
And the real reason for that is because of the reclassification of some of the folks in Parks and Rec. We went with less temporaries over time and more full-time employees to get the programming that she wanted. For example, the same person's taking care of the pool and other things, but it still requires a full-time person instead of temporary part-times. So the number looks bigger. That's why.
Okay, well, we're out of time for a workshop, so.
I'll send this to you. You can take a look at it. Feel free to ask me any questions. We'll refine it some more for the next go-around, but for the next 4 or 5 work sessions, we're all budget, if that's okay with you.
I guess I have one last question.
Yeah, go ahead.
In the blue numbers, you know, the increases, is that requests from the department, or is that like basing it off your actuals from this year, or just their request?
Request.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, being out of time, we will, with no objection, we will be adjourned. Let's take a couple minutes to regroup and get everything set up and
Oh,
Call the regular meeting of September 19th to order at 7:10 PM. If you'll join me in the pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A roll call, please.
Mayor Copeland,
Here.
James Burton,
Here.
Ken Jones,
Here.
Jeff Guard,
Here.
Melina Meyer,
Here.
Ann Schaefer is absent, David Allison,
Here.
James Weiss.
Here.
That's a quorum of council.
Move to approve the regular agenda?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the agenda is approved as submitted. Are there any conflicts of interest council would like to declare? Seeing none, communications by and petitions from visitors. We don't have any guest speakers on the agenda for this evening. So are there any audience comments regarding agenda items for tonight's meeting? Okay, seeing none. Chairpersons and representatives of boards and commissions. Cordova Community Medical Center.
Good evening, everyone. One of the things that have been going on industry-wide in healthcare recently has been the discussion about the regulatory burden that hospitals have to deal with. And at the August CCMC Authority Board meeting, I went over some of that with the hospital board, and I thought I would do that real quick with you tonight, and then introduce you to our new interim CFO and actually allow him to do a quick review of our balance sheet of the hospital that might help answer some of the questions that came up after one of your previous council meetings regarding the $800,000 loss that was discussed. So just real quick, hospitals, the regulatory burden on hospitals is really steep. For example, in the year 2016, there were almost 24,000 pages of new regulations from the federal government on hospitals and nursing homes. That's in 1 year, new regulations in 1 year. Hospitals have to deal with 629 different regulatory requirements across 9 different domains. And across the country, hospitals spend $39 billion a year just dealing with those administrative activities that are related to regulatory compliance. If you break this down into the number of admissions across the country, that means for every time a person gets admitted to a hospital in this country, that hospital spends on average $1,200 just to meet regulatory requirements. In 2016, there were new regulations for nursing homes that added $831 million of cost just for implementation of those new regulations in the nursing homes alone. It's estimated that nursing homes will have to spend $735 million a year of ongoing costs just for those new regulations. That amounts to about $100,000 for every nursing home in the country, just to continue to meet those regulatory requirements, just from the federal government. That doesn't count state government. One of the things that was discussed by Mr. Lanning in the work session about PERS relief, you've heard me talk about that ad nauseum. The hospital spends, if you break it down into admissions, for every time we admit a patient to the hospital, we're spending between $9,000 and $10,000 just for that PERS tax or PERS relief. When you look at it that way, that's a huge, huge debt and unfunded liability to the hospital. Typically, larger hospitals can absorb those types of costs. And the opportunity cost for that may be that maybe they wait a year or two before they add a service. In a small rural community like Cordova, those types of costs can actually mean the difference between having that service at all or not even having the facility available. The regulatory burden is unlike any other entity in the country. We have more regulations on hospitals and nursing homes than we do on nuclear power plants. Not even close. So that's just one set of the issues that we have to deal with. I don't want to take up all of your time, but if there are any questions on that, I'm more than happy to answer. If not, I can introduce our new interim CFO and let him do a quick review of our balance sheet. So, okay, Bill Stork is our new interim CFO, and he actually has a little one-page handout for you on the balance sheet. And I've got a copy I'll leave over here for anybody in the audience that wants it. So, thank you.
Evening. Evening. Well, I'll start at the top. I won't go through the whole thing. I'll just give you an overview. I think the concern was the income statement loss of 800,000 or so was directly attributable or would be a cash loss. And the balance sheet kind of shows you that it's not. This is what we present to people who loan us money, which essentially the city is doing now. We've got more cash in the bank than we did last year. We've got cash to cover our expenses. Receivables are strong. In the liability section, our biggest lion's share of liabilities is the PERS relief, and then the loan to the city, or from the city, excuse me. Typically, instead of putting it as a liability, we would book it as other revenue, which would be an offset to that loss. So you're still looking at a $300,000-$400,000 loss, even if you offset that. But that doesn't correlate directly, as it does in a lot of businesses, straight into a cash loss. And that's pretty much what I wanted to hope to get across to you guys. This is as the end of July this year. Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
So the other liabilities here for the $4,608,656.32, that would be your PERS?
PERS, yes, sir.
And then the $6,907,864.00 is the long-term debt to the city?
The majority of it is, yes.
They're switched.
Oh, that's switched, okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
So the PERS liability is $6,900,000.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And how fast is that increasing with us not making?
That increases every payroll about close to $25,000 per payroll.
How is that the same as last year then?
That is based on the audit from the state, and we've not received the new one yet for the new GASB regulation. So once we get that from the state, that'll switch. So based on whatever they say, we owe at that point. So it just gets one entry a year, and it comes directly from the state first division.
So what's the payroll liabilities of 1.2?
The current $1 million or more, that was my next question, actually, was $1 million difference from last year, payroll liabilities, can you?
We've been booking the current portion each month for each payroll as an accrued payroll liability of the PERS.
Yeah, that's that 25,000 per payroll goes into that, where it's that much more from last year. The 6.9 is just the once a year when PERS does their audit.
So, let me get this straight. We've gone almost $1 million more in debt with the hospital over the last year for not making PERS payments?
It's pretty close. Yeah. Yeah, and some of that's just the timing of when a payroll happened in the month. But yeah, it costs us a little over $600,000 a year on that extra PERS relief that's over and above what our contributions for the match for our employees. So that extra amount's what our employees will never see. That's the pay.
I understand all that.
Okay.
But it's a liability. However you want to categorize it, however much we want to complain about it, that is liability that we owe.
Yes, it is.
And the payables are 600,000 more as well, year to year. Is that?
It's pretty much a timing issue. We typically do our payables once a month, sometimes twice a month, and we're typically paid, $400,000 or $500,000 at a pop. So it could have been that, based on in the month of July, maybe we didn't make a payment, run to an AP run until the first week of August.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you look at it again, it would be down another $400,000 or $500,000.
Any other questions, council?
So how much more would you have to pay for PERS in order to keep from accruing? You have to pay another 600,000 a year just to stay even?
Yes, it's roughly that, yeah.
So above and beyond the cash inflow that the city's passing on to the hospital, we're another 2.7 million further in the hole from last year. Total liabilities.
Yes.
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 And you remember, 4.6 million of that is what the city has been putting in. Because the city has requested that that be considered a loan. So we have to put it on the balance sheet as an other liability.
Well, so that's $1 million, so it's still 1.7, we've gone further in debt.
If you take out the 4.6 that the city's requested to show as a loan, our total liabilities would be just under 10 million.
Yeah,
Which is,
but I understand, but, I mean, just shy of $1 million of that was this last year's, right?
right,
So, that aside, whether that stuff's there or not, or juggling balls with monkeys, whatever we wanna do, our debt load has increased another more than $1.5 million on the hospital over the last year. Right?
Yes.
And 600,000 of that was PERS payments. So then, what's the other million?
well, part of it would be the payroll part of the PERS that's being added every payroll. That's that extra $1 million or so under payroll liabilities. And then the accounts payable is, between the two of those, that's what, 1.6, 1.7 million?
But what have been the growth items for account payable? If we've grown $1 million in accounts payable, or have we been spending the other $1 million?
Electronic health records, probably.
That was a big portion of it. The EHR was, so you're asking what expenses? Is that what?
Yeah, where are we seeing the increases at? It's, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a pretty bare bones sheet here, and I can't tell where any of this goes to. It's just lumps here, lumps there, lumps there.
Right. And again, the 1 million on the PERS, the payables is a timing issue. The biggest increase that we see there is probably about 300,000 of that payables is inventory in the pharmacy because of purchasing the medications. So that gets turned over pretty quickly now with the pharmacy. So that's the biggest part of that. And then again, the rest of that is just timing. When we do our payables check run, we're typically spending $400,000 or $500,000 every time we pay bills. So if we would pay the bills on July 30th, and that would be, payables would be 1 million, let's say, instead of the 1.5 million.
And then your cash on hand would still go down.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you're still in the same hole you are, you just shuffled money on the sheet.
Yeah.
So, including the money the city gave last year, it's costing the community about $2.5 million or $2.7 million a year to have facilities here. Keep the doors open right now, right?
No, no. I mean, what the city is paying, the 600,000 or so, is what the community's bringing in, or putting into it. The rest of that comes out of operation, as far as the cash.
But we're still, the community, the city, or whatever, is still on the hook for the debts, whatever debts we're incurring, right?
Yes.
If you come in tomorrow morning and decide that I can't do this anymore, you decide you're gonna shut the doors and do that, the city's still on the hook for all these debts.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm not trying to be the bad guy here, I'm just trying to get a clear picture in my head, and I know I sound like the bad guy. I'm
Well,
not
no,
trying to be that.
I've been trying to get this, to anybody that'll listen to me, this is not something new with the hospital. This has actually improved recently compared to what it has been. I mean, you see that 4.6 million is, I think, since 2014. So that's 5 years worth of funds that the city has put into the hospital.
I think part of the problem here is being away from the way the finances work in the hospital. Some of you who are on the board got regular input on this. So, you know, this, in my mind, we're on the same trajectory here. We're on a 3-year plan with the hospital, trying to reduce the impact of these expenses. And this is a readjustment year in 2019, and I think 2019 is better than it was in 17 and 18. 19 will be better. So even though this, you know, looking at the PERS and stuff, our objective is to reduce the liability to the city over time and do the best we can. Cordova's not growing in terms of numbers. We're having ongoing conversations with folks about how we can make improvements to the income. We're having the facilitated meetings with NVE coming up pretty soon. And so we're trying to make those adjustments, but you know, this is a long-term. This is long-term. This isn't going to go away. And in any given year, unless something is skyrocketing, this is sort of status quo for the hospital. Actually, it's getting better.
So I'm wondering, you know, this is a piece of the agenda, and I don't want to get too bogged down, but I wonder if maybe there's just kind of a qualitative statement that you could give that would help council get their arms around this. In other words, the hospital's been gushing, but it's slowing down, and we're still not investing anything in capital or maintenance, or you know, we're still bleeding very, very hard, but we're not bleeding as much, and we're also making some improvements in capital and services that maybe will right the ship. And you know, kind of what's the overall? How would you characterize where we've been and where we're at? And then also, if I understand, is it close to operating in the black if you set all of the the PERS liability and the catch-up liability aside, and so is this really just a PERS problem, or could you kind of just give us a qualitative summary?
Yeah, if you took away the extra PERS payments that we're supposed to make, last year we would have broken even, maybe made a little bit of money on the bottom line. So on the income statement, which is, it tells you how you do in a year. The balance sheet is really the more important of the two financial statements, but you know, we reduced our loss from 2016 to 2017 by about $1 million on the income statement. We improved it that much. And that left us still with a loss, probably around, you know, we're still waiting for the audit to get finished, $300,000 to $400,000 of a loss in 2017. $600,000 of that loss is PERS. So if you take that out, it becomes a positive bottom line.
Which PERS is it though? Is it the current PERS?
Yes.
Or the arrears?
The current. Well, it's both, because every pay period, what's current becomes in arrears, you know, the next time when we don't pay. So that's where you add that almost $1 million onto the payroll liabilities. That part is included, you know, in the balance sheet. So on the income statement, it's included in there. That 600,000 would come off of the expense side of the income statement.
But each current PERS has a big component of catch-up built into it.
Right.
So
yeah, roughly 25,000 or so every pay period.
basically, that retirement plan cratered, and so you know, it's.
We ended up with 3 or 4. Okay.
No.
Well, I think this is something important for council to get their arms around and fully understand. I'm just thinking, I don't know that that's all gonna be in this one report. But what's our cycle for the next audit report?
They should be getting everything done within the next 3 to 4 weeks is what they said as of last week. There were a lot of issues this week. We brought a new company in last year, and there were a lot of problems with the previous year audit, so they actually had to actually go back and restate previous year audit. And this year, we had similar issues with that, plus a couple of other things that they want to dig into deeper to make sure that they fairly present the financial status of the hospital.
And that would be the 2017
Yes.
financials? And what's the, which 12 months are those? Are those a calendar year?
Calendar year.
Okay, good. So council may have a chance to look at those before the budget city budget is approved. Okay.
Yes.
Is there any other questions, council? All right, thank you. School board.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we have one tonight, so. Okay, we don't have a student council representative this evening. So approval of the consent calendar, are there any items council would like to take off of that? Okay, roll call vote, please.
On the consent calendar, David Allison,
Yes.
Ann Schaefer is absent. Jeff Gard,
Yes.
Melina Meyer,
Yes.
James Weiss,
Yes.
James Burton,
Yes.
Ken Jones.
Yes.
Consent calendar is approved.
Okay, approval of minutes.
Move to approve the minutes of September 5th, 2018 council regular meeting.
Have a motion and a second. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, minutes are approved as submitted. No bids to consider tonight, so mayor's report, well, I'll touch on a couple items, I guess. There's letters of interest in the Trails Committee. I would suggest to council that we expand the Trails Committee membership by one person so that we can include all these. I think they're really good and interested letters of interest from Michelle Hahn O'Leary, Wendy Rainey, and Ryan Schutze, and I recommend that we appoint all those to a slightly larger committee. Regarding the Borough Committee, I didn't solicit as quickly and as broadly as I would have liked to, so I've got partial responses. Let me grab my notes here. So I've had Sylvia Lang, Angela Butler, and Ezekiel Brown that I would submit for approval to the committee, and I'm waiting for responses from David Romhilt, EJ Cheshire, James Honcola, Haley Hoover, and then as alternates, I would consider Brett Bradford or James Cash to round out 7. And I have had, there would be, of course, city staff and city councilmen that will probably participate in kind of audit in a non-voting capacity. So I would recommend this council go ahead and approve the committee as submitted in the resolution. And then the idea was to have this committee participate in a Friday morning meeting after Thursday evening's presentation. What I would do is just have these ones that have agreed to serve on the committee and prospective ones, as many of those as possible, attend in kind of a work session format. And then I would bring the full committee back to council on October 3rd. So we could kind of defer the approval of the committee, but at least get the resolution approved. That's all right. Then the other item is I was contacted by Katrina Hoffman, the director of the Prince William Sound Science Center, and sometimes, as often happen with grants and big capital projects, opportunities open up very quickly and you don't have a long enough response cycle to draft a letter of support and get it in the agenda for council. And this was one of those cases where Senator Murkowski came through with a very strong letter of support for Exxon Valdez oil spill trustee funding for the construction of the Science Center, $16 million of the estimated $18 million cost. They've requested a letter of support from city council, and the deadline for kind of submitting their packet to line up the stars with the next trustee meeting and incorporate Senator Murkowski's letter is this Monday. So I guess I would look at submitting a letter of support from the city for them to get that funding from the trustee council. And I guess just a little background for councilmen, maybe some newer councilmen that aren't familiar. Many other communities receive very large capital projects from the Exxon Valdez oil spill trustee funds, and Cordova as a community really hasn't gotten a lot of brick and mortar funding. So, but I guess my question is there any objection to me getting a letter of support to the Science Center by Monday?
None.
Not for me.
I'm not seeing any, and I think that's consistent with the support the council and the city has given towards that project, so I'll go ahead and get that letter, and we'll get it circulated.
One thing I don't want to forget with the Evo, so that they have given us some money for this bill.
Yeah, that's true, and for the record, the EVOS has
$7 million or something.
Yeah, made a very strong contribution. Thank you, Councilman Allison. They did strongly support this. They've done other great projects in the community, but Cordova is also the most heavily impacted. So, okay, great. That's what I had. Is there any questions? Other questions on the report? Okay, thank you. Manager's report.
I sent you a Beecher update. It didn't seem terribly confidential, but I would treat that as attorney-client privilege. Sent you a hospital email on the accounting part of it. I gave you a sheet today on the fund balances. Those are some questions that have been asked. The one remaining question that I have is the after bailing or hauling costs anticipated or projected versus our year-to-date experience, and if we're saving any money. I would like to recognize everybody who worked on the paving and the sidewalks and the projects. They look really, really nice. The state was really nice, kicking in some extra work, as well as the contractor and some private individuals, so that all turned out really well. As you've seen, I sent out a picture of the gym floors done. Rich and company did really well on that project. And then on Thursday the 27th, the Forest Service would like to meet with us on the Forest Service management plan. Mayor's going to be out of town on that particular date, wondering if anybody else would like to come to that meeting with me. It's going to be 1 o'clock in the Mayor's conference room on the 27th.
Be a reminder closer to that.
Okay. Okay.
Can I ask a backup question you were talking about?
Sure.
The answers to the questions on cost comparisons between hauling with the trash trucks.
Yes.
That's compared. Can you restate what you said with that? It kind of got playing with these layers.
Well, what we're trying to do is, I think the question was, we anticipated that there were going to be hauling costs switching from bailing to hauling. We're not bailing anymore, so hauling. We anticipated that it would cost X. We want to know what our experience to date is. Are we hitting our target, or is it costing us a lot more to haul?
I understand, but what was, do you have an answer to that yet?
I will have an answer for you tomorrow. It's all written up, but we're revising it a little bit. I want to put it in a different format, but have it tomorrow. I think it's pretty close.
How about for land usage out there? Are we kind of up to snuff on how far we say we're going to be as far as burying everything now, or
we're using 10% more, and with the permit that we have 84 years left.
10% more is projected from last year, or 10% more?
10% more the difference between bailing and hauling.
Okay.
In volume. because it doesn't compact as tightly.
And for all forever, we have 84 years left?
Yes.
Left up.
So can we translate the years lost to dollars costs?
I'm sure I can. I don't know. Yes.
Because it is a big ticket item for community capping and dealing with the landfill there.
Yep.
And if we can see in our fund balances, we're still short of 500,000, and we've got capping that's got to come out of that regimentally before we even hit the grand poobah at the end of it.
Yeah. I understand.
Yes.
That's all I have unless you have any questions.
I feel like I might revert to Mayor's report for just a minute.
That's not what happened.
Because it's germane, but I don't want to rob the thunder, but the EAC Corporation Lands Committee met, and I don't know if the community's aware, but the EAC Corporation has a significant expense cleaning up all the trash and littering and stuff on their lands, and they don't charge fees for access to their lands. They've been a very, very strong community partner. And the Lands Committee has some concerns about, the sustainability of that model for their organization. But I think they're looking at well, I know they are because they said so, but they're looking at a very proactive approach of approaching the city to kind of partner in our overall refuse management that I think could be very, very good for the community and very community oriented. So I think we'll see something coming forth in the next couple months. But I really appreciate their kind of proactive approach towards continuing to be a strong community partner and looking at ways to help manage the overall trash rather than just try to manage their lands. So I think that'll be good news. Any other questions for Manager Lanning? Okay, clerk's report.
Maybe I'll give the school report, or at least the very limited volleyball
The student
report.
portion?
Yeah, there
Okay,
you go.
thank you.
So the new gym floor, volleyball will be using this weekend in the Fast Ferry tournament. As of this afternoon, I heard the Fast Ferry was running tomorrow. Has anyone heard otherwise?
No, I heard that it is running.
If anybody's on it, they would have heard if it isn't going, so.
I talked to the ferry, Monica?
Yes.
Yeah, she said tomorrow, the 20th.
It's a go.
Let's go.
All right, so 5 teams are coming here. Of course, 3 are from one school and 2 are from the other school, but that's fine. So 7 teams all day, Friday and Saturday. Friday's round robin starts at 9 and goes until 7 p.m. The last game starts at 7. And then Saturday, it'll be a bracket, so starting at 9 also. So we'll break in that floor. And there'll be a big, showing of parent support. I've been helping, a bunch of parents are helping me run the hospitality room. And then I think the basketball team is doing a cake fundraiser in the lobby on Saturday. So come spend some money and support the girls. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions? Clerk? Okay, thank you. Correspondence, as noted, this was submitted to the state. Ordinances and resolutions. Resolution 09-18-24, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, supporting the Alaska Salmon Hatchery Program.
Mayor,
Councilman Allison.
move resolution 09-18-24.
We have a motion, a second. Would you like to speak to your motion, Councilman Allison?
Yeah, I think we all know how important hatcheries are to our region, and the resolution, although it's a little long, lays out all the whereases, and I think we should support it, so I'll be supporting it.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the resolution passes. Resolution 09-18-26, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, authorizing creation of a City of Cordova Prince William Sound Borough Advisory Committee.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Allison.
I move resolution 09-18-26.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Councilman Allison, would you like to speak to your motion?
Being we spent some money on a borough economic study, we should get as much information out of the borough creation as we can, and I think a committee helps us accomplish that, so I'm in favor of it.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. We don't have any unfinished business on the agenda. New and miscellaneous business. Council concurrence of mayor's appointments to the Trails Committee.
I move that we approve the mayor's earlier comment of expanding the committee seat numbers by one, so we can appoint all three citizens that put in letters of interest.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are you okay with that, Susan? So we have a resolution, so we just make an administrative change to change that to 6 members.
I might just throw it in the consent calendar next time with,
Okay.
with naming.
Formalize it?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, discussion? Council? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Council concurrence of mayor's appointment to the Prince William Sound Borough Advisory Committee. So I guess we could park that until the next agenda. That'd be all right.
Well, why don't you name the 4
Okay.
that you have,
So-
if that's 4?
So I'm submitting 3 at this time: Sylvia Lang, Angela Butler, and Ezekiel Brown.
And Melina, right? No. Oh. Okay, Sylvia, Ezekiel.
Sylvia Lang, Angela Butler, and Ezekiel Brown.
Move to concur.
Do you not want to put a council member on? You can ask for a
Well, I just
council member.
haven't had one who's indicated
Oh,
interest.
Do we have, if this is gonna be a deliberative body that makes decisions on what to recommend?
It's just advisory. So they'll basically review the report that's issued by Information Insights. They'll meet as a committee to discuss that and kind of concur on the recommendations to council.
and they'll take votes. I mean, as a committee,
Yeah, they'll
they will
vote.
take
No, but what I'm
votes.
saying is I don't know that it's legal to have a council member as a voting member of that committee. I think any of us are welcome to sit down and be ad hoc members.
The suggestion there was ex officio, wasn't it? That's what it was.
Yeah, for a councilman, I think, I kind of agree that having councilmen sitting on a committee that's advisory to council is kind of structurally, so, okay.
Just put 3 Parks and Rec commissioners onto a Trails Committee that advises Parks and Rec.
Yeah, I understand.
But, and we've always had council members on those kinds of committees, but maybe we shouldn't. I hadn't thought of it that way. Often we had one on as a parliamentarian type person in case that was in a group.
I don't know, we can get an opinion, but
We've done it in the past.
I've always thought that it was a very poor structure. I mean, you're giving a councilman 2 bites at an issue, then, they get to vote on it and approve it, so, anyway.
We have recommendations from council that it was not the wisest thing to do. We've asked.
Yeah, I think we have had that feedback from the attorney. The other thing is the whole idea of a committee is trying to get more broad-based community input.
Okay, so we should.
Okay, so there's those 3, and I just mentioned real quickly, I was also had solicited Dave Romehill, E.J. Cheshire, James Oncola, Haley Hoover, and we'll also pursue Bradford and James Cash as people who either have been on council in the past and seen other iterations of borough and also have broad representation in the community with different organizations and business communities. Discussion, council?
Did we have a motion and a second to name the three then?
We have
Yes.
a motion.
We had a motion,
Oh.
thank you.
Who?
Councilman Ellison
sorry.
made a motion, and now we have Councilman Garber the second. Thank you, yeah, I hadn't heard a second, actually. Okay, now discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so Sylvia Lang, Angela Butler, and Ezekiel Brown are appointed, and I'll bring more names to the council as they commit. Council action on disposal and method of disposal of Lot 1, US Survey 4606.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Allison.
I move to dispose of Lot 1 USS 4606 as outlined in Cordova Municipal Code 5.22.060B by requesting seal proposals to lease or purchase the property.
A second.
I have a motion, Councilman Allison, second, Councilman,
Meyer?
sorry,
Meyer or Jones? Well, they
Jones.
both, they were,
Jones. And Councilman Allison, would like to speak to the motion?
The Planning Commission, this has been through the discussion for a while, I guess, and the last time through it was discussed that when somebody put in a bona fide letter to start the process, that we would consider at that time, so costs money to advertise, but somebody is interested, and obviously I think there's some other interest in this lot. There might be some issues with access, but it looks like those can be dealt with. This is the first step, so I'm in favor of moving forward with advertising for proposals.
Councilman Jones, would you like to speak to it?
I just, like Councilmember Allison said, there's been other interest in the past on this property, and I just think that it'd be the right way to do it by advertising and requesting proposals from any interested party.
Okay, further discussion, Councilman Weiss?
Just with access or potential easements for this other lot, is that something that'll get discussed later? Or it seems to have been a problem in the past? I'm just.
I think, yeah, I guess ultimately if the block gets developed, that will have to be part of the building permit or development process, I would think. Okay.
Well, we've gone through this before, and the reason that they were disposed of as didn't block access to that, or use the best access to that remaining parcel property, which is gigantic in comparison to the lot. So, until that's remedied fully, I don't know, has there been talk of recording that as an easement for the rest of the property, or?
I think if you were
Through Alan to staff.
I think if you were to use that triangle and make that an access easement, in addition to the section line easement, then that lot is, there's very little left if you want to have, the access easement as well, so.
Very little left of the lot itself to build on, if you want to have an easement to there.
Yeah.
I guess, hearing that, I wouldn't even recommend disposal of the lot, again, for reasons already stated.
Further discussion? Sorry, Councilman Weiss, I guess I missed.
No, that answers my question. Yeah, I'm not really for if it's constricting access. We've been here a couple times since I've been at this thing, so. I don't want to discourage anybody from building here, but I don't want to cut off anybody later, even more.
Okay, further discussion, Council?
I guess I just read through the history of it. We have it listed as available, so I guess I'm a little torn about how to vote for it, because if we put it out for proposal, should we say that there's
this concern, and maybe they would have a way to address it, the easement, if they're willing to build a small house on that property. I guess I just don't know why it's listed as available if it's been, this has come up and people put letter of interest in, and then council says, no, we're not gonna get rid of it year after year. So should we move it to unavailable because of easement, or am I missing something?
I think in the past, there's been different opinions on whether an access easement is needed. Some say it's the best access, some say there's other means. I mean, if you read the minutes from the planning commission, you can clearly see that they don't, most of them at this point don't agree that that's the only way to access it. So that is why it is available on the P&Z list. In the past, there has been a strong agreement that that is the best access, as you can see in the history. So that's kind of the flip-flop of it right now.
Councilman Burton.
I think we heard from more than one person in the past in meetings this, yeah, there are other ways to access the property, but the concurrence still is that that was the most, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but that was the most efficient access to that larger parcel property.
Okay, well, council can certainly vote not to dispose of the properties. Further discussion? Councilman Allison.
Yeah, I guess I'm still in favor of putting it out for proposals, and the proposals can say what they want to say, and the planning commission is obviously aware of the situation, but if we're not going to approve this once again, then maybe we should ought to combine these two into one piece of property, so that somebody that does want the property up above can get it all and build their road. Either that, or we should build the access to it, because we're doing absolutely nothing with these pieces of property if we keep telling people no, they can't develop. So, but I'm still in favor of getting proposals at this time.
Okay. Any further discussion? Councilman Gard.
I haven't got the history with this that some of you others have, but would there be any advantage to if we did put this out for proposal now, to have staff make recommendations for access to this? You know, just plan on opening up the rest of this at the same time, coming up with an access for it, whether it's best, most convenient, as long as it's decent access, you go in there and not too cost prohibitive. I mean, is there going to be any advantage to? Because at least then we'd have something to make a decision by if we want to keep that other land open for development.
I think it's kind of, yeah, I don't know, the sequence of things, if there's no easement on it and, you know, and then you advertise the property.
Well, I don't know that it'd have to be an easement on that. I mean, there's been comments that there are other ways to get access up to it. I don't know what that.
So I'm not sure, I'm sorry, you might just direct that question to Manager Lanning, and maybe the staff can.
It seems to me in a proposal like this, we're putting the proposal out. It's up to a person who's going to propose to provide an appropriate access to the property. If we're going to take those properties and consider an access that makes them all usable, I think that's an entirely different process. I think it's, you know, she asked if it's available, we're making it available, we're seeking proposals, and if somebody comes up with a great proposal, fine, but if they don't, and one of the access is not solvable other than in a manner that we've already considered and we're not in favor of, I don't accept it. But I think to go out there and say, we need to build a road on this property that makes them all useful, that's a different thing.
I'm not asking to build a road.
No,
I'm
no.
asking to figure out what the other access would be because if we encumber this lot with the right of way through there,
Yeah.
then it makes it non-useful.
Right.
Is there some other way we can do it that's feasible for development of the other properties?
Yeah, I think that's a separate consideration for us, just relative to the properties themselves and the development of those properties.
Okay, Councilman Jones.
Yeah, I just have a question, I guess it'd be for staff. I'm curious, what is the actual size of this lot? And then if we put an easement on it, does that constrict the ability to construct a septic and well on the same lot? I know there's size requirements required for that. So by reducing the size of the lot by an easement, it might make it undevelopable.
There's two issues, access easement, and then there's an easement required on the, section line, thank you, that have to be dealt with. You can ask the state to vacate that easement. Is there an actual, do you have the actual number of square footage? No, I mean, if the easements were both in there. Because I thought when
The square footage of the easement
yeah,
of that triangle, now with that drawing, triangle shows.
yeah, and then the section line easement is on the plat. So it kind of gives you an idea of what. See the plat on page 44? So see where that, on the top of the lot? And then the triangle is just estimated here. And I mean, Don Showstead walked a lot, and you know, his recommendation was this is the best access. It's not the only access, but it is. And so, but you know, P&Z's look at it as there's other access points. So there would be other options for septic. Of course, there's always combustible toilets, chemicals, things like that. Water, catchments, you know, you can flip-flop one for the other. So there are those kind of options. I can't tell you if there's enough room on there for both.
Any other questions? Councilman Meyer.
If we put this out for proposal, could we put in there that there's an easement, or do we put an easement in before we put out proposal, or how would we make that easement part be a part of the request?
Well, when we did it last time, we said that we drew this triangle in and we had some measurements for it, and we said this would be required. And then we showed the section line easement, and then I believe we got no.
You end up not putting it out.
And we ended up not putting it out because of this. But certainly we could show them. And, you know, you have to also consider topography and all the other things that would be eliminated by these two easements.
Councilman Gard.
There's one comment made earlier about asking the state to vacate a section line easement. The section line easement doesn't run through the other two lots next to it, it doesn't look like.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the advantage to the state of having an easement through this lot to nowhere?
I don't know. They just have easements on all section lines.
I understand, but the section line just stops the other two lots.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way before we did this, put this out, we could petition the state?
I guess
vacate that?
Well, I guess my thought would be, I don't believe that's something the city should do. I mean, we can if you want to spend the money and time to do that.
Well, what are we talking about for money?
I have no idea. No idea. And I don't know how or long, if they grant it or not.
I don't think the section line easement is as prohibitive as the access easement.
Other questions, Council Lewis?
I'm just gonna say, make a motion to put this out for proposal with an access easement.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table, so it would be a motion to amend to include an easement requirement on the request for proposals.
An access easement requirement?
Yes.
Yeah, a good look would be on that topographical lines. You look at that photo and then look where those easements would be. And that might help with what's remains for buildable space.
On page 49, oh, I see on page
45.
And 45. Yeah, because basically the easement, of course, is gonna be on flatter ground on the shallower rise. So that puts the building on the steep part. It isn't good for access, so. Just as a practical consideration.
So would you consider that if he's amending the motion, is he making a condition on the? It's just amending the motion.
I think the idea would be that the RFP would include that easement access as a requirement of purchasing and developing the lot, which the person who is purchasing and developing the lot would be responsible.
The cost
of.
Okay.
You agree that that's what you?
Yes.
Okay, is there a
Cost of
second?
Recording the easement, or?
Will you second it? Okay, yeah. So Councilman Meyer seconded the amendment. Councilman Gard?
I was just trying to get clear on what we're.
Yes, according to city code, when city property is purchased, the person purchasing is responsible for all costs associated with that. You would have to survey out that easement and put it onto the plat so that it's a legal recorded easement.
And is the intention, Councilman Weiss, that the easement would look something like page 49?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I'm sure through proposal, that person would reflect that and ask the price later for it.
Any discussion on the amendment? Councilman Jones?
Yeah, I would just, I guess like to point out that this has been the larger portion that we're worrying about protecting access to has been put out for bid in the past with no responses. I guess I just don't feel like we need to keep protecting access to that piece of property when it's not the only access. It may be the best, but it's not the only one. And we haven't had any interested party for the last time it went out, which was a year ago, pretty recently. I just don't want to see the city prohibiting somebody from developing a taxable property. I mean, we want to grow our tax base, our pie, but then we're stopping growth. So I'm not in favor of the amendment that is currently on the table.
Further discussion on the amendment? Okay, all those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Did it just not? It was 3-3.
3-3, so it fails.
Yeah.
Okay, so discussion on the main motion?
So, point of clarification, did the motion pass, or?
The amendment,
The amendment
the
failed.
amendment to require an easement when you circulated as a proposal failed. Okay, so, could you do a roll call vote, please?
On that
On the
amendment?
main motion to,
On the main motion, are we to the main motion?
yeah, the main motion to,
Just to dispose of it
Issue
by
a request
putting it out for proposals. Melina Meyer.
Yes.
David Allison.
Yes.
James Weiss.
Yes.
And Schaefer is absent. Jeff Gard.
Yes.
James Burton.
No.
Ken Jones.
Yes.
Motion carries.
motion carries.
Can I get the 3-3 fail on the amendment, though? Who was in favor of the amendment? Burton,
Meyer.
Weiss, and Meyer. Thank you.
Okay, pending agenda calendar and elected and appointed officials list.
Shoot, did I I probably didn't put the 9 AM meeting that we didn't know about, maybe when I put the packet out, on the 21st. So 7 PM tomorrow night is the Borough Economic Feasibility Study kickoff. I keep pointing over there, but it's in here. And then 9 the next morning, I guess as many as you guys want to come, and it's open to the public, will be just kind of a work session of the committee that has been formed, but doesn't have a full seated quorum yet, but the 3 will come, I hope.
And Council, I just mentioned I won't be able to attend the meeting tomorrow night, so I'd ask Councilman Meyer to just give a welcome, basically an introduction of information insights on behalf of Council. Kick it off, so.
Unless one of you want to take over that duty.
I just thought there's a little continuity there since she attended the meeting in Girdwoods. Other items for pending agenda, Councilman Jones?
Mr. Mayor, I apologize if this is out of order. I just thought of it after we voted on the other item. Would it be proper to put the other property out for bid at the same time, just to see if there are any current interested parties, and then we can evaluate both bids simultaneously? So if we do need to protect that access because there is an interested party in the larger lot, then we still have the ability to, by denying the bids.
I just have 2 thoughts. We could put it on a pending agenda for future. We have a comprehensive plan process that's starting. Maybe that's certainly going to be one of the big topics of the comprehensive plan, is what is council's vision for development and what areas should we be putting out. So I mean, I don't have that disposal of that on this agenda, but I think we've heard the suggestion, and there might be an economy of scale to do something like that. So, but
we've already voted, but
yeah,
you don't have to accept the bid until you wait for the other one to come back. I mean, you can see if there's any interest before you accept any bids, even if it's advertised.
Is there any interest in putting that on the October 3rd agenda?
Yes.
For the larger?
I would say do it more quickly.
I just don't want to string somebody along waiting after they go through everything to put in the bid and get their stuff together, and then have us change our mind and say, oh yeah, well, we thought about that, but we really want to shave off this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of disposing of it unless somebody wants to develop a larger property, but we've advertised it in the past with no responses, so it'd just be kind of a double check thing.
So you might have to help me on my Robert's rules a little bit. Can councilmen move to reconsider something that's been passed or in the same meeting, or?
Yes.
They can, but I don't believe that a new item could come before them. That would be like adding an item that isn't on the agenda.
Yeah, and it hasn't been published or anything, so, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we can put it on the agenda for October 3rd.
Correct.
Good.
Got it listed.
Councilman Allison.
Looks like our PISWAC representative's term is up next month.
Oh, thank you.
Tom Baylor currently.
Yes. And he has been fairly active there, so I think he has expressed interest there. I'll check with him to see if he's interested in continuing. If not, he's a former councilman.
And it's a tough fill because it can't be a permit holder.
Yeah, it can't be a permit holder, and we have had city councilmen typically on that, but we.
Yes.
And it's not so much an advisory thing, it's just a,
Conduit.
A conduit, I guess, so.
Come report on their meetings.
If there's no objection, I'll check with former Councilman Baylor, and if not, I may solicit you guys in an email to see if there's interest at a non-permit.
Either way, an appointment should be on the next agenda.
Yes, that's right,
Okay.
so we'll have an appointment on the next agenda.
They usually get in touch with me, so I haven't gotten an email, but we'll make sure we do that.
Thank you, Councilman Allison. Okay, there's no other items for pending agenda. Audience participation. Would anyone like to speak to any of the items?
they have to be on an agenda item?
Nope.
No, anyway.
Hello, Kathy Renfeld, Cordova Chamber of Commerce. Do I need to give you my address or anything like that? So I wanted to come back and touch base. Many of you were absent when I presented to City Council on the results of the Economic Summit a couple weeks ago. And some of the things that came out of the Economic Summit were that quality of life and economic development are actually really intertwined in this community. One way that we can really work on economic development is by keeping Cordova a desirable place to live and raise families. And so the Chamber works both in economic development and in quality of life. And as you're looking at the budget and you're thinking about growing that pie, I'd ask you to look at all the line items. Some are decreases year over year, some are increases year over year. And if you're going to increase a line item, I'd like you to consider if there's a possibility that that line item could actually produce more revenue for the city. And I think that recently the city's investment in the Chamber has been a very profitable one. If you look at the dollars that the city puts into the Chamber and the money that is generated back into the city coffers through the accommodation tax, and not only that, but the sales tax, which the Chamber works hard to keep high and steady as well, and to the property tax, which Quality of Life works to maintain as well. So the accommodation tax has been going up a lot. 2014, it was at 114,000, 2015, 119,000, then 120,000, and in 2017, 187,000. And that's a sharp incline, although it's impossible to know the exact incidences that created this. It certainly correlates with an uptick in tourism related to chamber-produced festivals and events. The Shorebird Festival from 2016 to 2017 more than doubled. And in an official survey to Cordova businesses, they indicate that that is the festival that has the highest impact on their bottom line. And that's a chamber-produced festival. The 4th of July and Friendly's Festival have also shown their highest numbers ever recorded in 2017 and 2018. That could explain the significant rise in visitor traffic despite it being more difficult and more expensive than ever to get here. The Chamber is also the champion of this community to try to work to maintain regular ferry service and transportation into Cordova, without which it would be very difficult for this community to continue. I understand the city manager's efforts and the council's efforts to maintain a conservative budget. It's always better to spend as little as you can when you don't know exactly what's going to be coming in, but we must support diversified revenue streams. If you want to grow that pie, you really need to do that. And a diversified economy requires startup support, development assistance, networking, and mentoring. A healthy economy brings in as much money from outside the community into the community as possible, and then keeps it circulating as long as possible. That is a healthy economy. And the Chamber does a lot of their work centers around that, unlike any other business or organization in town. The Economic Summit we hosted in April was the first event that the Chamber did that really truly focused on economic development. We sort of dipped our toe in with that event, and what we found was a hugely positive reaction, a response that businesses and community members alike felt that we needed more of this type of event and this type of support. In the Chamber's work, I just want you to realize the kind of breadth of the work we do. It's crucial that somebody in this community, an organization in this community, is working on economic development, exploring new opportunities for the community, supporting entrepreneurs, and acting as a vehicle between business owners and the government. Businesses need support to support one another and the community. We need to keep that money circulating as long as we can in Cordova. And the Chamber leads the charge on this front as well. We're encouraging businesses to partner and work together, and local people to support local businesses. And of course, we're working for, to maintain our ferry service, which is going to be an ongoing battle that is going to require much dedication and consistent support throughout the coming years. We're seeking out and courting the right kind of tourism that supplements and works together well with the industries and the businesses that we already have in Cordova, something that won't change Cordova in a bad way, but that will help it and supplement it and add more to that pie. We recently been working closely with a potential tour operator that could be bringing 60 people a week into Cordova every week in the summer. So I'd like you to consider that if you're going to grow certain line items in the budget, I'd like you to consider growing the line item for the chamber. It is almost guaranteed to make more money back for the city. We're requesting that the city of Cordova set a standard also for our funding so that we have some kind of an idea year over year what we're going to have, so that we don't have to make 3 budget scenarios every year and come to you and ask for this amount, so that it enables us to actually be advocates for city businesses to the city council, who now has the ability to give us $0 or $100,000. I mean, we have no control, and there's no standard set. So we're requesting that the city council set a standard for the chamber's funding at 75% of the 3-year average for the accommodation tax revenue, or $90,000. And for 2019, the 75% of the 3-year average of the accommodation tax would be $106,864, and that increase is rather small compared to the overall budget and to some of the line items increased already. It could really, in the hands of the chamber, do a lot of good. It could bring on another person that could do, I mean, we have 1.5 people right now. And just think what we could do if we had another person, if we had the ability to actually provide true business development support in Cordova. If we could actually have the resources and the time to market the Cordova Center to meeting planners. If we could truly be courting out the right kind of tourism that's going to supplement shoulder and off-season tourism, as well as sport fishing season and the few festivals that we have. This also decouples chamber funding from the rest of the city's main revenues. If the main revenue from the city is fish tax revenue, on a year where it's a bad year for fishing, you need the chamber to perform even more so in that scenario. So by separating the funding sources there, you're allowing that, and you're incentivizing the chamber to keep performing. We've been doing really a lot of good. We're on a roll, you could say. We've got a strong board, we've got strong, passionate staff. We have support in the community. Our membership is growing. This is the time to invest in the chamber, and I think that it'd be a really good investment.
What is your percentage of accommodation tax? Yeah.
There is no correlation. Although the accommodation tax was set in place in 1999 with the idea that it would support chamber funding, there's never been any correlation between what comes in the accommodation tax and what's given to the chamber. So what I'm asking is that let's correlate those two things.
I could be wrong on this, and we have the person that has all this knowledge in their head right next to you, but we as a council can't tie the hands financially of any council behind us, so any standard we set could be unset the very next year.
I understand that, but I also see the same line items being repeated the same way year over year in budgets with small changes. Yeah, I'm not asking for, code to be put into place to say this. I'm asking that we start correlating the two things, and it could start here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Other audience participation? Now's your chance. Okay, seeing none. Council comments. I'll start to my left. Councilman Jones.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for coming out and participating again. And I guess a couple comments I would have. This kind of should have brought it up during pending agenda, I guess. As far as, you know, city center use, the Board of Fish, you know, we have a meeting coming up in October for the hatcheries, but the next cycle for our area, hopefully we can court that meeting to Cordova. You know, it's always kind of flip-flop between Valdez and Cordova, but I do know there is a bigger and bigger push every year to have those meetings held in Anchorage, and I just want to get a jump on it. So just keep that on your radar, that it's only 2 years away, and they plan things a year in advance, so we got a year to convince them to come here for 2020.
Good point. And North Pacific Fisheries and Marine Management Council is another one that's never met here.
Yeah.
And they do have us on their radar, so.
Yeah, so I guess that would just be my comment when we just, you know, we're talking about growing the pie earlier, so yeah, thank you.
He just reminded me as well, John Bitney's planning on coming to the October 3rd meeting. He's gonna go get back from Moose Camp, go to Juneau. When he gets to his office and back to the Borough Materials, he's gonna put together some information, and he would like to have, I think, a little time as to speak to council.